is IGE Talks, the September 2013 episode of this monthly TV talk show here that we produce in Grand Rapids, Michigan at the offices of the Institute for Global Education. My name is David Blakesley. I'm the host of this program. And what you're about to see is just a conversation like we have on the first Thursday of every month here at IGE, where ordinary citizens from around the area get together and talk about important issues of the day. Sometimes they're local, sometimes they're statewide, national, or even global. Sometimes they're political, sometimes they're cultural, sometimes it's just an interesting idea that somebody's had, and we sit around and talk about it. It's very unscripted, very free-flowing conversation, so we hope you sit back, watch, and enjoy our discussion tonight. And you're also welcome to come on down here the first Thursday of every month, 7 o'clock p.m. IGE is located at 1118 Wealthy Street Southeast, just down the street from the Wealthy Theater. As an organization that's been operating for more than 40 years in pretty strong opposition to war and in strong advocacy of nonviolent resolution of conflicts, nonviolence not just as a preference but as a way of life, as an attitude of the heart. Obviously it produces quite a challenge for a lot of us here at IGE. Many of us, including myself, have been supportive and sympathetic to the presidency of Barack Obama. Maybe not everybody here, certainly don't claim to speak for all of us, but it's a very controversial issue. We'll get to some of those constructive ideas, but first let's kind of introduce ourselves to each other. Again, my name is David Blakesley. Been hosting this program for about 7 or 8 years now. I'm a member of IGE and just basically a concerned citizen, a social worker by trade, but somebody who likes to talk about these issues and hopes to stir up some good conversation here tonight. Let's go to my left here.
Tom Burke. I'm also with the Institute for Global Education. I do anti-war and labor organizing.
My name is Joe Fletcher. I'm a concerned citizen and activist who's done a lot of work in a lot of different issues, and am organizing an anti-war rally this Saturday.
Yeah, which probably by the time the program airs will have already passed, obviously, but maybe there's more rallies to come in the week. It's good to have you with us, Joe. Thanks for coming.
I'm Amy Bennington, member of IGE also, and I work with the Circles of Peace Working Group here at IGE.
I'm Chester Lowe. I am a member of IGE as well as, well, part of the cast of the show here too.
Okay, Mike Franz, I'm IGE board. There are other board members here tonight too. I speak for myself usually, and I'm normally very outspoken. I hope I get a chance to talk about how this issue fits into our other programming at the Institute for Global Education as we seek our 29th week of peace education in Grand Rapids. We'll be talking about that later.
It's an annual thing.
It's an annual, yeah. This is the 29th year.
My name is Mike Kowalski. I'm a member of IGE, and I'm a local anti-war activist. Kim?
My name is Kim McKeon, and I'm a volunteer at IGE, and I'm also on the Peace Festival Committee.
I'm Katie Villier, and I'm on the board of IGE here, and a kind of semi-retired college teacher.
I'm J.D. Sullivan. I am a journalist and the founder of Progressive Media Partners, and I've been involved with different kinds of activism throughout the years.
Well, so this is our guest. So let me just start out to the group there. President Obama, perhaps to profound disappointment for some of us, came out and made the kind of statement that says we need to, initiate a military response against the nation in the Middle East. Now, a lot of us back in 2002, 2003 were really up in arms when President George W. Bush made the same kind of announcement. Who would like to just kind of speak to their kind of first reaction, just kind of their response, whether it's from the gut, from the emotions, or the mind? How did it strike you when you hear the president getting us more deeply involved in a high-risk military situation like that?
Well, I will.
Okay.
I've been a little disappointed with Obama particularly in the area of education. But this, I guess we could see this coming because of the way that the president is trying to deal with this. Such an intractable Congress, and who just seems to be against almost anything that he wants to get accomplished.
You know, I maybe to go back a little bit, to put a little context out there, I did mention, you know, there's these really horrific videos that people have seen them of the aftermath of what seemed like a very brutal attack that took place in Syria back in August. And after a little bit of research and fact-finding and information gathering, our foreign intelligence operations concluded, the United States that is, that the attacks perhaps used the nerve gas sarin, a very deadly, lethal substance, and that it was used on a block or several blocks involving the death of hundreds of people. Now, there's been some disputes about how many people were killed, whether it's somewhere in the 500 to 1,500 neighborhood. I guess there's going to be some debates over that. But, you know, I don't know that there's anybody who says, well, chemical weapons, you know, that's just kind of the next stage in the evolution of war. There's not been a voice that I've heard condoning that. The controversy comes from, what do you do in response to this violation?
Are you saying that these voices we hear that say there's no proof, that's like the...
Well, nobody's saying that if it is chemical gas, they're endorsing that. There may be some people who say it wasn't the Assad regime that used those weapons. Some are saying the rebels themselves did, whether intentionally or by mishandling weapons that they didn't know what they were given to them.
You've heard that report?
Yeah, I've heard that report, and there's a whole range of, I guess I have to think, some of it's misinformation. People just looking to muddy the waters and create confusion and doubt, but who's creating the confusion and doubt, and who do you trust?
Well,
I think
you gotta go
that's
back
a
to
core
the ways
issue right
of
there.
American history. The American people have been fooled and fooled
Yeah.
and fooled in
Right.
engaging in war.
Oh, for
I mean, you can go all the way back to the sinking of the Lusitania in World War I. And Winston Churchill arranged for that ship to be in German waters. He knew they were looking for the ship, and he
Okay.
took away their protection. They sunk the ship. We went to war. And we had a president at that time that campaigned to keep us out of war.
Yeah.
You know, and then you've got the sinking of the ship in the Cuban harbor. It blows up. Well, it blew up because there were munitions on it.
Right.
That shouldn't have been there. And so we go to war with Cuba and we get the Philippines. And you can follow American history right
Yep.
down the line. World War II starts with a sneak attack. And I'm not going to get too involved in that, but there are a lot of people who think we saw it coming and let it happen.
Yeah.
For-
Well,
for
so is there,
reasons.
there
Let's
a
go to
premise
more
that you're
recent
saying-
history.
Well,
It doesn't stop there.
well, I understand. Do you think?
Well, I interrupted Dave
Yeah.
with this question because I thought maybe there was this thing, well, like, the climate deniers,
Well,
there's 1% of the scientists who say it's not happening, so do we have to
well,
listen to
anytime
that?
there's an aggressive action,
Yeah.
there's going to be people undermining the credibility of that action. I mean, that's just the politics of it. But I guess the question is,
But the
Mike, or does anybody
politics
else-
can run both ways.
Well,
Go
of
for
course it
Tom
does.
Kin, 99
Right.
out of 100 senators voted for it.
So
And
do you think
the-
Obama's
it
trying
was
to draw us
completely
into a
false,
Syrian
the
war? Can I
reports that were
get to the
coming out.
point? Do you think
Yeah.
Obama's trying to draw us into a war in Syria? Or do you think he's actually saying what he means, which is a limited action to send a message and just to leave it at that?
Or is somebody trying to draw him into a war?
Well, that proposal has been
Because
out
this
there
is
as well.
such a neocon crazy thing, and I'm
Assad
surprised
is
he's going
goading
for it.
Obama to see if they can draw them in. Todd, did you
Yeah.
want to say something there?
Sure, you know, it has to do with this imaginary red line that, you know, Obama says he didn't draw it, but if he didn't say it, who did? You know, he's the one who's drawn the line.
Well, there's some anti-chemical weapons treaties that are out there to say, you know, we don't use sarin, we don't use nuclear weapons, we don't use biological weapons. I mean, I don't know the specifics of all that, but I mean, that's been a pretty standard convention of, you know, you don't go there and fight wars.
Sure, there's also conventions against atom bombs,
Right.
which the United States is the only government to ever use.
Remember Agent
There's
Orange in
conventions against
Vietnam?
napalm, which the United States used plenty in Vietnam.
Yeah, Agent Orange.
Yeah.
Agent Orange, as this friend says, is another one.
Yeah.
White phosphorus, which they've used.
Land
uranium.
And more
Yeah,
recently,
right.
depleted uranium and drones, you know?
Mhm.
How come the US doesn't follow the conventions on these?
Yep.
But now they have a red line for a sovereign country, which, you know, they do have stockpiles of chemical weapons. And similar to small countries with atom bombs, it helps prevent them from having their governments overthrown by the US, you know? So I think that's why these countries stockpile it, is to prevent disruption to their own country from European and US, you know,
Well,
invasions.
and does it seem like the threat that Syria presents in the region in retaliation for an attack is one of the things holding the US military or other militaries back from going whole bore into that nation and just out doing regime change?
Absolutely. I'm opposed to the war. I'm helping
Yeah.
to organize the protest Saturday. But I think the US, if they do go to war, which I'm thinking is likely at this point, I think they're going to end up in a worse situation because Syria is not like Libya. You know, Syria is not a place you can just attack and expect nothing to happen.
Right.
The Syrians have said that they may attack Jordan if the US uses Jordan to attack them. That will create another very volatile
Yep.
situation and possibly a second war. Syria has military capabilities
Oh, yeah.
that other countries don't have, including its air force and, you know.
With strong Russian support, so there's a whole
Absolutely.
global, you know, dominoes are all set up,
So
perhaps
it's-
ready to fall, you know?
Almost sounds like a scenario for the old Cold War where things could go wrong and get
Well,
out
yeah.
of control.
Yeah, yeah.
So the stakes are high.
Extremely high, yeah. This is very serious stuff. This is not even Iraq, I think if you go back to that, 10 years ago, Iraq was diplomatically very isolated. There was no other, rival power ready to back them up. Even if the United States and the coalition that Bush put together was opposed on principle by many nations, nobody was going to fire back, so to speak. So I think there is a greater risk, even though I don't necessarily draw strict equivalencies between this and the Iraq war, because I don't think, I guess my question and reservations, I don't know that Obama was seeking this war the same way that Bush was seeking the Iraq war. He arranged the facts,
Yeah,
to
so I'm
fit the
sitting here,
narrative.
one of the progressives who would normally back Obama,
Yeah.
wondering, why is he falling for this thing? I mean, why is he going so overboard?
Well, we can only speculate, but let's go ahead, what do people think? Why is Obama going out on this limb?
Because of his relationship with Israel.
Yeah. There's a very strong one. The Israeli lobby really seems to
We
want this.
constantly get involved in the Middle East because of our relationship with Israel, but we also constantly get involved because we try to force our ideology on them. And the Arab world and the USA, they think differently. We think logically, and the Arabs think emotionally. And we're never going to be able to get anything done until somehow we can find a way to communicate. We don't know how to communicate.
How does Israel think?
They think logically.
Well, they're logical, not emotional.
Yeah, they're emotional too, but
Oh,
they're,
yeah.
they, you know.
Aren't we all?
But no, but the Arabs are, they are much more emotional-based people. They think from the gut. We
Well.
think from the head. And you know what? You got to have both to work to work something out. And they both can claim the land. If you talk about Israel equally, the Israelis throw it that, hey, it's, look at the biblically, but the Arabs can throw it out just as biblically too.
Sure. With-
Basically, it's brother versus brother.
Well, yeah, the whole region is in a state of civil war, if you will, although in some places it's a little bit more in check than in others. I guess the politics of the Middle East, very roughly speaking, there's a more traditional tribal Islamist segment of the population, and there's a more secularized, maybe not Western, but ready to be a little bit more on terms with the West. And these two forces, these two cultural kind of, this chasm here that exists is playing itself out in Egypt, in Tunisia, in Libya, and in Syria. There's not a strong enough consensus either way. Both sides feel like if they can just get the upper hand, then we'll win. We'll get our vision of what their nation is going to become. And I think that's what's happening in Syria in a really brutal way, but that's also what's happening with all the unrest in Egypt, with after their Arab Spring, and it's.
Well, I think it's interesting how
yeah.
Britain this time has backed down.
Mhm.
Well, yes, let's talk a little bit about that. So
Yeah.
the British Parliament was David Cameron, the Prime Minister, put a motion forth to the Parliament to, go along with their strong ally, the United States proposal, much like Tony Blair was brought in to support Bush back in 2002. And, much to David Cameron's surprise and most of the onlooking world, the Parliament pretty decisively defeated that. Anybody have any thoughts as to why that might have happened and why people were so surprised? And
Didn't Tony Blair lie to the British people to be involved in the Iraq War? I don't think they ever got that.
well, okay, so there's kind of once bitten, twice shy.
And the Labor Party
A lack of
itself
trust.
was in ascendance at that point, so he
Right.
had kind of a free rein to do it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
they're not there now.
Before
They're not,
Syria.
in that, the
Well,
conservatives are. in
Cameron's a
charge.
conservative, right?
Yes.
Right, and is the Conservative Party the majority in the Parliament as well?
Yes.
But,
They are the
so,
moment.
and this is one of the weird things, is that you think of conservatives that tend to be pro-military, more warlike, more ready to, puff up their chest and go into battle when national honor or security are at risk here. And yet, there's a strong coalition both in the United States and in England to say, on the conservative side, we're not gonna go for this war. What a strange dynamic that is.
Yeah. Very much.
Well, if you look at American history, I would disagree with you about conservatives taking America to war. It's mostly Democratic presidents.
Okay, well, make
Put
your case.
America to
Yeah.
war, in one way or other.
Yeah, just to say, my view is who takes the U.S. to war, who controls the government, and who decides what the military does. It's rich people.
Yeah.
And they're both conservative and liberal.
Yeah.
But what they all are is they're all rich,
Okay, so
And-
there's a class economic element there.
And, having worked for most of my life, I've worked with plenty of conservative working people.
Yeah.
And that's what's changed, is that working people and most middle-class people have gotten sick of the wars.
Mhm.
And this is the longest reign of war in this country ever. And it's the same for the British people,
Yeah.
And I think the conservatives came to power because Blair went to war. So then people who might vote, based on labor versus conservative, they say, what's the difference? Why bother? And that's how Cameron got in. And I think likewise in this country, it's very clear that Obama beat Hillary because Obama opposed the Iraq War
Yeah.
and Hillary
Yeah.
supported it.
Yep, yep.
And that's why he beat Hillary,
Mhm.
and that's why Obama beat the next two,
But McCain, who was seen as a continuation of Bush, and people really wanted that break.
Yeah.
And then, Mitt Romney also had his own problems as a candidate, maybe more related to the economy and the 47% and all of that. But, Obama won re-election pretty handily there.
So it's
Yeah.
fascinating now
Mhm.
to expose
Yeah.
that I think the American people,
Mhm.
which is mostly working people,
Yeah.
that's the majority, it doesn't matter really if they're conservative or liberal or progressive or whatever, Progressives are looking at Obama going, there is no such thing as a progressive war,
Yeah.
in the Middle East.
Yeah.
That's an oxymoron.
Yeah.
Yeah, so how can this be? So
Yeah.
people are looking at, it's a moment for us in history.
Yeah.
Where people are looking at this country and the government in a way that hasn't happened. Maybe it happened a little bit around Vietnam.
But even
in
then,
the
that
wake.
struggle was so, just gut-wrenching for the country, because you had really the World War II generation versus their own kids, if you want to draw it against generational lines.
Maybe
and,
the British
you know,
have learned their lesson in history.
Yeah. Well,
Because
yeah,
the
yeah.
British, many times, would go on over there and force their ideology, and also many times were in control and occupancy of many of the Arab countries.
Yeah, and the British don't really have that same kind of stake in the game anymore.
No,
I mean,
they don't,
can
but
come
but you see,
alongside,
maybe
right?
sometimes we need to look at history.
Right, yeah. No, I hear you.
And the
Well-
British left Afghanistan.
They did.
They're
The
gone.
British,
gone.
the British, you have to realize, urged us not to go to war with Iraq. And they knew what was gonna happen. They knew it was gonna turn into a tribal affair,
Mhm.
and it was just gonna tear that country apart. They knew that, and so did Cheney. Dick Cheney used that back, and don't forget Desert Storm.
Yeah.
And that's the last time an American president actually went to Congress to ask for the right to attack.
Mhm.
And Bush, the elder, got his one vote that he needed,
Yeah.
and he says, we're going. And after that, they had a coalition. They didn't
Right.
use the United Nations then. But, you know, you go back there and all of, I mean, that's all sitting there. And I saw an actual YouTube document of where Dick Cheney gave 8 reasons why they didn't finish Hussein off
'92
in the
the
first war.
Desert Storm.
The first war, pardon me.
Right.
There's been 2 wars with Iraq.
Kuwait.
And then one of the reasons was it would turn into a massive civil war, which it has.
Yeah.
And that civil war is not going away.
Oh, no, there was another bombing just today, killed a bunch of people.
I think the British are probably a lot more pragmatic and realistic than the Americans when it comes.
Well, and I think they don't have, I mean, they have a military-industrial complex in Britain, but it's nowhere near the magnitude of this country. And, you know, there's been some very fascinating political breakdowns as far as who's opposing the war, Obama's proposal, and who's supporting it. And on the Republican side, you've got people who oppose Obama's proposal as a purist libertarian. They're more isolationist. This is the Rand Paul and our local representative Justin Amash position. Then you've got people who I think on the Republican Party who oppose it because Obama's the one suggesting it. And if this was President Romney or President Bush, they'd be all behind the commander-in-chief and, you know, anchors away and pounding the war drums. But because of the political thing, they don't trust Obama, so they don't want to get behind it. Then you've got conservatives who don't like Obama, but they do support it from sort of a neocon perspective because Israel wants it or the military industry wants it, and there's, you know, money to be made off of even just selling the missiles that are going to go into this formation. On the progressive side, you've got people who support Obama and support the war because they buy into the neocon agenda as well, or they're supporting him because of political alliances. He's our guy and we're going to stand behind him because he's the president. We don't have to look bad. Then you've got the more progressive types who like Obama but don't want to support the war because it goes against their values. So, I mean, it's just a very interesting reshuffling of the deck.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, as you said, Tom, there's a unique moment going on where this could have some long-term political ramifications. When we were, you know, a little over a year away from midterm elections in 2014, Justin Amash, again, today tweeted, if you vote to support the war, you might as well start clearing out your desk, to his fellow representatives. In other words, he thinks the Syria proposal is so unpopular that if you vote for it, it's going to kill you in the next November's elections.
Wow.
I don't know if that's going to bear fruit politically, but it's a very interesting statement. I mean, Amash, who I do think has larger political ambitions than just to be a lifer in the House of Representatives, is really staking his reputation to this and, of course, the
Well, I would
NSA.
hope so. He's an Arab.
Well, right, he's Palestinian.
I would
He
hope
is.
so.
He's half Syrian.
Yeah, well, his mother was born in Syria. I guess he identifies as, is it Palestinian or some Lebanese?
He's Lebanese.
Yeah, Lebanese, okay. So there's a mix, but he's definitely got very strong roots in that area, which I think gives him an additional bit of credibility on the subject.
What's Obama's so-called grassroots group organization for change, or?
Well, he was Organizing for America,
Yeah.
now
Well,
it's.
they're-
yeah.
Unless something just changed since I came here, they're sitting this one out. They're not
Yeah, the
emailing
political-
anybody, they're not on board with this.
They're
at all.
they're not using the political capital at this point.
And like you said, Juan Dowler's probably not gonna
No.
get back him. He hasn't got
I think
really
it
a lot
is
of
a
support.
kind of political strategy, though. For Obama.
For Obama?
Truly, yes.
He's making a
Absolutely.
political strategy?
Yes.
To divide the Republicans, or what?
Yes.
Yes.
That's one that he would, I think he would hope for that outcome.
Well, that's
to-
obviously happening, for
To
sure.
regain some kind of power in Congress.
Yeah.
To,
Power or
go ahead.
popularity?
There are some who are saying that it's to be a distraction from healthcare and
yeah.
other
Yeah.
issues like that.
Oh, I
Yeah.
think so.
The problem is that the result, as a political strategy, is he's likely to divide the Democrats as well.
Well,
Yeah.
he absolutely will. You know,
Absolutely.
this will be
Absolutely.
divisive across,
Mhm.
this is
Oh, yeah.
fracturing the whole political landscape, if you think about it just in terms of alliances and support, so that's a good observation.
I've heard too that the generals in the Pentagon do not want to go into that. That's a
They are-
can of
they
worms,
are
and they
warned
don't
out,
want
yeah.
anything to do with
Yeah.
that.
They
Which
were leaking
surprises me
information.
in some ways.
Well, they've had their fill.
Well, I'll tell you why I say that,
Yeah.
and some of you are aware of PNAC.
PNAC?
What's that?
PNAC.
Project for the New American Century?
Yeah, they published, that was the neocons document.
Yes.
Basically for going to war in Iraq. They had that all set up in advance, but they argued in there that America could afford 2 wars simultaneously. And I read the first 30 pages of it, and I said, oh my gosh, we're in trouble.
Well-
They want us in a perpetual state of war.
Yeah.
And they said we can fight 2 at a time, you know, and I'll tell you, the generals bought into it.
Well, there was a long-term.
Everybody on that far right, whatever, bought into it at the time, and it made it very
Well, the
likely
idea was that if they could shake
Iraq
Saddam
would happen.
Hussein, they could then sort of reshuffle the deck in terms of the politics of the Middle East.
Now, then you pick your next axis of evil, and you
Right.
go to that. It might be Iran, it might be North Korea, now it might be Syria.
But,
You know, and it really doesn't matter as long as you keep it going, you know, and keep feeding the Pentagon's fervor
Yeah.
for more money, more, you know,
well, yeah.
billions and billions of
There's
hundreds of
even
billions of
political
dollars.
debates about the cost of a Syria attack. Would that be a supplemental, because it's not budgeted right now. The Department of Defense, like all the other departments, is under a sequester, so there's budget cuts and things that are happening sort of arbitrarily. So would they throw more money? Would they try to cut social welfare benefits to pay for this? I mean, there's all kinds of nasty business going
I'm
on
gonna bring that
there.
up. All these different wars that are being set or stipulated practically
Yeah.
are the things that distract people from looking at the facts that we need to get taken care of over here in the United
Oh,
States.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And
There's
that, I mean, I was earlier asking Kate if it's popularity or power that we're looking at. Well, actually, I think it's both. I think it's both. And with the popularity and power, it enables people of Congress and Senate, as well as Obama, to distract people's attention from the necessities here in the United States. And with that, that supplies a number of people in power or in position to not have to worry about what senior citizens or
Oh, yeah.
students
Yeah.
or a number of people who need funding, who need support, to be not heard.
Yeah.
And that's a situation that, I mean, it's very strategic, very strategic. It's almost like a dichotomy. You know, we're doing something for the country, yet we're doing something for the country to make sure the country does not get what it wants or needs.
Well, and that was one of my first thoughts, is imagine the president pouring this much energy and focus into any one issue, education or something else, and accomplishing something great with it, instead of war.
Well, it is interesting that he can propose war and get a block of Republican support, whereas almost anything, like
Well,
sort of as
yeah.
Katie said, any other initiative he proposes, even if it's healthcare, which used a lot of the Romney and Heritage Foundation ideas to create this system, well, because it's Obama, the Republicans are just rejecting it. They can't allow him to appear successful or mainstream. So yeah, but war,
politically.
there's a coalition ready to jump, you know, with an R behind their name
There's
in
a
Obama's defense. Go ahead.
Point of interest, I was reading an article, I can't remember, they were interviewing people off the record, it was either the Pentagon or the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and they weren't happy with this at all because the U.S. military since Iraq, or through the Iraq government, has been training people in the U.S. military in a non-conventional war.
Yeah, right.
And if you put troops on the ground in Syria, it's a conventional war, and they're saying, we're not ready for this.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, just the fatigue. I mean,
Yeah.
you've got guys who are already on their third or fourth, tour of duty in unconventional environments like Afghanistan, Iraq, and just the sheer firepower and organization. I mean, the Iraq War, there was months and months of buildup. There's nothing like that that's prepared for Syria. And God forbid we really get into that kind of a conflict. It will be.
I wonder if a better parallel to the situation would be Kosovo rather than Iraq.
Well, that's what some people are
Bush
saying.
was a magnificent salesman for fear, and we had to attack Iraq before they
Well,
got
yeah,
us.
and I think there was also a religious component to that. I mean, maybe it's a whole other side issue that we won't get into, but I think Bush and Tony Blair both had the support of people of like-minded religious beliefs behind them who bought into almost this holy mission or crusade idea, especially in response to the 9/11 attacks and radical Islam and the war on terror and all of that. That ship doesn't sail quite the same, especially with somebody like Barack Obama at its head.
Yeah, it was, how do we really know what these politicians want?
That's such a mystery, really, isn't it?
And that's what people are asking. Why does the White House want to go to war in Syria so badly?
Yeah.
And people think, is there oil in Syria?
There's not.
And the answer is not really.
Not much.
It's a difficult country to have a good economic life, and they've done pretty well given the scarcity of resources they have.
Mhm.
Yeah, but you know, if you take out Syria, that opens the way for a pipeline through there across the pan-Arab world, which is what the whole war was about in the first place. And Dick Cheney won't tell us who was at that energy meeting, that secret meeting they had when they came into power.
That's
And
right.
they told the energy people, we're going to war, we're taking out this guy, we're building a pipeline across the Middle East, and you people are here to make all this money. And I tell you, we're damn fools to listen to that kind of, I mean, but they kept it secret. You see, the secret government goes on, doesn't it? We just had a recent thing on the NSA spying,
Yep.
they're not telling us what's
Yeah,
really going on.
war abroad means repression at home for us,
Yeah.
the people who oppose those wars.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So the situation is, the U.S. was forced to leave Iraq, and that gave Iran more say in what's happening in Iraq than any other power. They have the most
We're
influence.
still key players.
So the U.S. has actually been set back in terms of its ability to dictate to the Middle East countries.
Well,
And so if they can topple Syria's government, it does a number of things. If they take out the Syrian government, it's not like the U.S. wants chaos in countries, but they'll be fine if there is chaos. Look at Libya, look at Somalia, they'll just tolerate it, So if they topple Syria's government, it does a few things. It isolates Hezbollah in Lebanon and takes pressure off of Israel. The patriotic forces of Lebanon defeated Israel the last time Israel tried to attack
Yeah, they went up
Lebanon.
into Lebanon there.
So that's a
Yeah.
very isolating situation for Israel to live for the last decade in. So if you take out Syria, it isolates Hezbollah there. It also causes the Palestinian resistance to be dampened down, and the Israelis can continue the removals of Palestinians and maybe even speed it up to finish the job. And then it allows the U.S. to go after Iran as the next so-called enemy of the U.S. And at that point, it's Iran kind of on their own. So you have this resistance that currently exists to U.S. domination of the region.
Well, and I think that's part
They
of the.
want to take it out.
Right, that's part of the message sending is not just to punish Syria, but to say to Iran, if you mess with us or you go over this line, you're next. Because Iran does have a very strong presence in the region, obviously, they're a major player, and a cultural exporter of a certain type of Shiite religion and political kind of a blend there that could become very destabilizing the more it spreads around the region. So there's a lot, there's a lot of, I think, forward-thinking globalist strategy happening that motivates these things.
So when I express this view that I've just expressed, I often get attacked for you're paranoid, you're
Yeah.
conspiratorial, but do you know where I get it from? I get it from reading the Pentagon's own documents.
Yeah, when you read.
That's where it comes
right,
from,
their policy,
you know?
right.
And they want to pivot to Asia. Obama was saying it in November. Want to pivot to Asia because they want to contain China.
Yeah.
But they can't do it because of their failures in the Middle East. They can't do the two wars they want to do in the world at the same time. They can't even do one and win it.
I'd like to
So-
comment on Mike's talking about Cheney is suddenly out of the last week, he's just reappeared.
And Rumsfeld too, he was just here.
Attacking Obama because he hasn't already done something. It's like, I thought he was dead and gone or something. Here he is all over the headlines, you know?
Modern science.
But who does he
You
represent?
resurrected him, and I don't know what for.
Well, there's a reason. you know?
Go ahead, Justin.
Tom, I was gonna ask you, where do you get attacked at? I'd like to know that.
Sorry?
What geographic area do you be where you get attacked? Is it here or is it elsewhere, like in Chicago or Detroit? Where?
You mean the political repression?
Yeah.
Well, 3 years ago, the FBI raided homes in Chicago, Minnesota.
Right.
And I got followed around Grand Rapids because I was taking my computer to go write the press release about the raids in Chicago and Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
And they subpoenaed 23 of us to a grand jury to say that we were supporting terrorism in Colombia and Palestine. And it seems as we organized rallies and protests against this grand jury,
Mm-hmm.
which we did not attend, and they say the investigation is ongoing 3 years later. You know, September 24th is the anniversary of the raids, 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
But in opposing this repression, it became very clear it was about Palestine. And why is that? Because Palestine has a strong movement that people around the world are more and more supporting, and Israel and the U.S. are more and more isolated, you know?
What is the place of Turkey in this particular
Well,
situation?
yeah, Turkey is on Syria's,
Well, I
Syria's
know
on
where-
Turkey's
I
southern
know where it
border.
is,
Well,
but
no,
I just wondered
well, this is
politically.
for the
And
viewers.
there's
that,
so
you know.
many refugees.
Well,
in
that's
Turkey.
a huge issue, which we really haven't even gotten into, is just the humanitarian nightmare of, you know, millions, hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of people streaming out of Syria, living in massive camps, like 100,000 plus people in rows of tents and just bare subsistence conditions, and more coming in, including children, including, you know, feeble, frail people. Yeah, Turkey's obviously very concerned about this. Jordan, Syria's kind of north and south neighbors, are having to deal with the aftermath of this civil war. So I think they're very much on pins and needles over there. Is that a, okay, well, never mind, a little glitch there. I don't know what Turkey's official position is, but I think there are some actors in the region that would like to see the United States just get up and do it, you know, just to kind of, you know, blast Assad.
Well, Turkey is part of NATO.
Right.
And France, unlike Britain, is the
Ready to get
the
in.
pit bull who wants the war to happen.
Right, right.
And that, as someone said earlier, has historic roots
Sure.
in the
Sure.
domination of France over many other Middle Eastern countries,
Sure.
including Syria.
Syria,
former
Lebanon.
colony.
And Lebanon.
And a chance for France to assert itself on that global tough guy military stage.
But France cannot assert itself
No, not
without the
independently.
U.S.
No, of course not.
And
But they
so
can,
Turkey today has, for instance, German troops stationed on its border with Syria in anti-aircraft units. You know, the last time Germany and Turkey got together for a war, it was a disaster for most of the world, you know, World War I.
Okay.
And Turkey also, interestingly, their government captured Free Syrian Army members in their capital carrying what? Carrying sarin gas, you know. And that followed the March attack, which was confirmed that the so-called Syrian Free Army rebels were the ones who carried out that chemical attack. And you don't hear John Kerry standing up and say, well, there's evidence to the contrary that it was the rebels who did the attack. And there's just a lot of questions about those chemical attacks. Why would Assad, on the day that the UN inspectors show up, order an attack? It's ridiculous, you know? But maybe it's the case, like you said, that some rebels mishandled it and set it off. It could be a case where there's all these different factions in the rebels, including, you know, Al-Qaeda factions. Maybe one set of rebels attacked another set, you know? The U.S. says, well, it came from a military base. Well, in Syria, one day the rebels hold a military base, the next day the government
Yeah, it
holds.
doesn't take a whole lot of launchers to lob some stuff around.
So there's
And
all
by
kinds
the
of.
way, you mentioned the United Nations. What is their role in this conflict?
Well, right now, the United Nations is in a bit of a paralysis, or at least a perceived paralysis, because Russia holds a veto over any Security Council resolution, and because they're seen.
And China. They
And
want
China,
out.
right. So both of those nations could gum up any UN coalition because of their desire to back the Syrian government.
And why wouldn't they? To stop and think about it.
Why
You-
wouldn't they?
Why would any power, you know, in their right mind want the United States to go in and start bombing?
Well, yeah, of course.
You know,
Right.
I mean, we have law in the world, established law, and we've got a court, a world court, and we've got, you know, but the United States goes it alone.
Well, let's talk a
We
little
don't
bit about
follow,
that.
and yet we hold up the laws that they're trying to protect, and you say, well, they're sanctified, you know, you don't use chemical weapons. Well, they would be the first one to say, that's right, let's, you know, if he's guilty, let's bring him to trial before the world court and convict him. You know,
Yeah.
let's put this process that's been in position all these years that we haven't supported, make it work. But we don't do that. We go our own little way, and we're gonna have our
Well,
own
people
little
don't want to
way.
be accountable to a world court, so, I mean, in the United States certainly, you know, and there's a whole political thing about our sovereignty and blah, blah, blah.
Well, there's international law that takes
Right.
precedence even over the United States, but we've never accepted that.
Well, politically, it's a non-starter for, you know, certainly a big portion of the political establishment is that we would ever be subservient to some international law, so there's a lack of.
So why can't
law.
Russia and China behave the same way as us?
Right, well, I agree,
You know,
that's
they're-
a very fair
they're the
point to make.
superpowers, they're members of.
Well,
the, you
they're
know.
them and we're us.
Yeah.
And they're emotional, they are emotional, and we're logic.
Well, that American exceptionalism, which again, some, especially on the conservative side, really parade as that's our identity, and even, again, that religious sense of mission, that, you know, God created the United States for certain reasons, and so.
Is that exceptionalism or exceptionism?
Exceptionalism is the word, yeah.
But I think it's the wrong word.
Well, okay, we can debate the semantics of it. But, and Mike, you were kind of getting to that. If we take the story at face value, that Bashar Assad and his army launched chemical weapons against their own citizens in this horrible civil war, the analysis or the analogy to concentration camps back in the 30s, why did the world just stand by and do nothing when these horrible atrocities were taking place? If we draw this conclusion that these horrible atrocities of nerve gas, sarin gas, last month were being used, what's a response to that? Do we just let it go? Do we just stand by and shrug our shoulders and say, no, this is terrible, but there's just nothing we can do? And I know none of us are really in decision makers, positions of power to do something, but what would be a course of action that might address the issue more substantively and more constructively than lobbing Tomahawk missiles into some Syrian military base?
Which is actually a vigilante kind of action, and there's nothing legal or moral about doing that.
Yeah.
And what would it
Or
account?
humanitarian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will, I have something from Women's International League of
Sure,
Peace and
let's
Freedom.
hear from them.
And I'll just read the black print here. Ensure effective investigation of the attack through an extension of existing mandate. Seek UN Security Council resolution to secure handover of any WMD in the possession of any party to the conflict. Request the UN Security Council refer the matter to the Office of the Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court.
Yep.
And for support a political solution through inclusive peace talks.
Okay.
Yeah, and that is a classic nonviolent,
That's a good
you
idea.
know, social justice orientation. And I guess that's maybe time to start shifting the conversation a little bit. I mean, if people want to go up in different directions, but, you know, there's been a lot of protests, there's a lot of concern about the potential stakes, the wires that might be tripped, leading to what some have called World War III. If U.S. attacks Syria, Syria attacks Israel, Israel attacks Iran, Iran, you know, is defended by the Russians or whatever. I mean, we can really envision a whole horrible, you know, sequence of events. And so nobody wants to see that happen. It might, but culturally, you know, are we on the brink of something positive coming out of this, with a strong majority of Americans, for whatever reason, whatever their motivation, whether it's to make Obama look bad or to stand on principle or to just say, we can't afford this war, we've got our own problems here at home. Is there some kind of turning point that we might be able to say to our politicians, damn it, you gotta stop this war stuff. We've gotta find a better way of addressing even these terrible situations and these gross moral violations in a way that doesn't just add more sin and more tragedy and more devastation on top of what's already taken place.
You're asking, is there a silver lining?
Well, I'm saying, is there something that we can do to redeem this horrible dilemma that we're facing?
Well, we can't be indifferent
and
to
make
the-
something
the
good
fact
come
that
out of it.
weapons were used. But there's a whole backlog of law and everything else, you know, to deal with that kind of thing that we've been ignoring and pushing off, and to make it possible for somebody to do something like that.
Yeah.
And the next time it'll be a weapon of mass destruction that's really a weapon of mass
But
destruction.
who's really controlling the weapons of mass destruction?
We're
Controlling
Well,
them?
yeah, I mean, we're manufacturing the components of these chemical weapons,
Yet we're the ones,
continuing to make nuclear
we're the ones who
weapons.
want to attack other countries because we think they have mass destructive
We've
weapons.
destroyed most of our chemical
Yeah,
weapons, but
we
we've
still got some.
reserved some too.
Yeah, well, but I think the components, I don't know the veracity, but I've read articles that say the British were selling some of the ingredients that could have been used to make these chemical weapons
Not
months ago,
surprised.
within the last year, you know, to Syria, while the civil war was already been going on. I mean, that's grossly irresponsible, you know?
So should this be bringing these, our country along with other countries to some kind of a halt, where we can have like a Cold War going
Well,
on instead of a,
it seems to me that you can't undo what was done with this chemical attack, but that doesn't mean you have to stay within the next 2 weeks, we gotta start launching missiles. I mean, do this investigation, do this coalition building, build a consensus that says even if this cannot be allowed to stand, we don't need to just, you know, rush headlong to make our statement right now. It's like, you know, say there's crime in a neighborhood and the police just go in and, you know, just ransack every home looking for the weapon, looking for the criminals, and violating the rights to
And people
get
have
to
done
the
that,
bottom.
too.
Well, I know they have done that.
Yeah.
But this is on a much larger scale and with all kinds of other ramifications. We've got to find a way as a society to say, let's be a moral leader, not just a military leader.
Claims were made when Saddam Hussein was
Yeah.
fighting against the Iranians over the oil fields and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, somebody used the gas, and a lot of people died on both sides, and investigations were inconclusive, actually as to who did it.
Well, but those same
theory was
investi-
the wind blew it back. You know?
But that same information was used from the late 80s, you know, back in 2002 to justify the Iraq War. Well, Saddam used gas on his own people,
Yeah.
and that's the thing that just
And we knew we
kills
had
me,
it
yeah.
because we gave it to them.
Right.
Yeah, who
But again,
created Saddam
people who were making and
Yeah.
defending that case are
See,
now
using it.
kind of backpedaling and trying to somehow say the Iraq War was good, but this Obama thing is ridiculous, and that's just.
We now know, though, that Hussein did not actually maintain those chemical weapons and so forth.
Well, I've seen some people say, well, he sent them all to Syria, and this just proves that they were right all along. I mean, people are gonna believe it, they're gonna believe, they're gonna find
But he
it straw
maintained
they tend to-
a staunch front against our ability to go in and prove that point, because he wanted to maintain an edge
Yeah.
that maybe he did have those weapons.
Oh, right, yeah, he didn't want his blood
What
to be
is
called, right.
the Syrian president doing? He's doing things that make me believe that he is guilty. you know, he's actually doing things. He's moving things away from their chemical centers and setting them up so that if we do attack, you know, it'll be a problem for us, not for them militarily.
Well, and I think that the Assad regime is really just trying to hunker down and ride out the storm, hoping that eventually we'll get tired of Syria as a headliner and leave them alone and let them go back to doing what they're doing, even if they're never quite as big and powerful in their own nation as they were before the Civil War broke out.
Well, that's what makes the claims by John Kerry and Obama so difficult to believe, because the Syrian government finally has the upper hand
Okay.
in the
Yeah.
war. You know,
Yeah.
everyone agrees. And then they invite in UN inspectors, and the same day, it just doesn't add up that they
Yeah.
would do this
Yeah.
attack on the same day.
Okay.
So,
There's some circumstantial
So there's somebody in the middle of this
confusion
whole
there.
thing.
Yeah.
well, there's some people who claim, I don't know, but they claim that it was what they call, black operations, that, a foreign government, had set up this operation and couldn't predict when the UN inspectors were arrived.
Hmm.
So they carried it out on the wrong day, essentially.
Yeah.
That otherwise, the US could have launched an immediate attack due to the outrage, That's a very speculative thing.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's speculative to say Kerry and Obama's narrative, their story of what happened, doesn't have much evidence behind it,
And that's what Putin is saying.
Yeah, he's demanding you go
Putin is
before the
saying that
UN
he's-
and show it.
Putin is saying he's willing to go to war with Syria, but there's not enough evidence that he's seen with it.
Hmm.
He was just saying that today.
And now he's drawing a line too, isn't he?
Yeah, that's a strong.
Show me the
he's
irrefutable
trying to preserve
evidence,
some.
and we'll withdraw our objections from the
Well,
UN.
he's trying to preserve some credibility. He doesn't want to be seen as a defender of the use of chemical weapons or an apologist for
Yeah.
it. So he's saying, if you prove it, then I'll support the cause. But the question is he open to the evidence? I mean, this is sort of from the pro-Obama
Yeah.
position here. Is Putin a bad actor, or is he truly a man of his word? If we show him the evidence,
I think he's calling a bluff.
Yeah, I think definitely. There's,
Put up or shut up.
yeah, there's all kinds of angles going on here. But I guess I would like to steer towards a little bit more towards that constructive side of things. We've done a lot of critiquing, and there will be protests, and those protests are very well earned. But there is an opportunity to align ourselves, those of us who have a history of being against wars in principle, with some new partners in this, people who might have been supportive of Bush and the neocons in the Iraq War, who are now, again, for various reasons, saying we're not part of this. And I guess this is, I mean, we've talked about the Tea Party, we've talked about the Libertarians, and anybody who knows much about IGE knows that that's not really a political perspective that this organization has embraced, although we're very welcome and willing to dialogue with those folks. But I've seen over the last year or two some interesting alliances that could develop between these two supposedly opposite ends of the political spectrum. And that's kind of what intrigues me, is finding some common ground with people who on other issues we might be very inclined to disagree with. I'm just kind of wondering, Joe, I know you haven't had a whole lot to say, but you're putting this rally together. Do you know of any libertarian Tea Party types who might be present to be supportive of this anti-war effort?
Oh, yes, most definitely. I went to the Justin Amash town hall rally. The crowd was pretty much overwhelmingly against going to war with Syria.
Sure.
And most of the attendees seemed to be either libertarian or more conservative, Tea Party. And the thing was, most of them didn't seem to be, oh, this is, Obama wants to go, so we don't want to go.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them brought up, Iraq, and people who, like you said, would have been with Bush, they're just tired of war.
Yeah.
And doing a state organization for, this anti-war campaign that's going on with Syria, I see a lot of students who are very, the young libertarian crowd,
the business types.
very, very, very against, for a lot of different reasons. A lot of we don't have the money.
Right.
You know,
Sure.
but a lot just, you know, just for the younger generation, I
Yeah.
would say we've been at war with the Middle East for most of our lives.
Yeah,
The people in
as long as they
college
can
right
remember,
now,
for sure.
they don't want to get into another thing. A lot of people, or when it comes, seem even progressives seem to completely disagree with Obama in terms of military action, given his use of drones.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of party politics breaking down on this issue with that.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, really across the spectrum, overwhelmingly, I see a lot of people coming together on this issue more than I have on anything else.
Yeah, there may not be an issue in all of American politics that more people agree on than don't attack Syria. And that's pretty amazing, because typically when our political leaders have beaten the war drums, there's a good close to half the populace that's ready to just march right behind them. Sometimes it's more than that.
Yeah,
much more.
but now the opposition to all of that is forming for the first time too, and people are coming out. and
Well,
declaring
that's
in
exactly what I'm
favor.
saying.
Yeah, there's gonna be supporters for it, a strong
Right.
support.
Well, and you know, there is a question, will Obama make sort of a White House, you know, Oval Office speech or some other kind of big statement that he gets on national TV and lays it out there and puts his presidential credibility on the line and calls in all of his chips from those who support him on this issue or that. That could have perhaps tipped some scales of public opinion, because we really haven't heard that forceful message from him yet. And the political arm, the Organizing for Action, or whatever it's called nowadays, has not really weighed in, as Mike observed earlier.
Well, the ones that have, though, are kind of interesting. I got back from, I was gone for a day. I had 140 emails. And I must have had in there 12 requests to support organizations that were opposed to the bombing.
Yeah.
That then they want to get an anti-Syria, or
Yeah.
anti-bombing
That's
Syria
beginning
kind
to-
of thing going.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
it's everywhere, you know. But these are all liberal sources that
Yeah, right.
are contacting me, and I don't know about on the other side, you know.
What would it look like if we didn't attack Syria?
Well, that's a huge question, and the United States is sort of backing down and saying, you know what, folks, Congress didn't support it, or the American people aren't for it, so I guess I'm going to change my mind. I mean, can we really imagine any American president calling for war and then say, well, you all disagree? Well, okay, never mind all that, we'll just figure out something else to do, you know? That's a very, I mean, as much as it might even damage a president who I still support in many ways, it's like, I would love to see an American president humbled to the point of saying, you know, we really are a democracy, we really do have a representative government, our people aren't behind it, so we're gonna think creatively and find a better way out of this mess
I
that
think
we're in.
every day is humble pie for him. I don't
Well,
think that would bother him.
Line up the facts and get censorship at all levels of the United Nations, the World Court,
I think
whatever
there
threats.
are plenty of nonviolent, punitive steps that could be taken.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
There
economically, I mean, they can, you know, hack the hell out of Assad's computer network, I don't care, you know.
Yeah.
You don't have to put bombs and people at risk, you know, to make your statement. There's insidious, creative, diabolical things that they can do behind the scenes to sabotage the Assad regime that don't hurt an innocent person.
Well, in fact, they've already been doing them, and the
Yeah,
US is
well,
involved in the war.
I'm sure they are, I'm sure they are.
Back
but-
in the spring, Obama said that they had been secretly sending money, that they already had teams, intelligence teams on the ground training rebel forces.
Sure, all that
Obama
stuff.
said this. And then there's the relationship with the Saudis and Qatar
Yeah.
and other emirates, these royal monarchies of the Middle East, oil-rich monarchies.
Supposedly, some of them have said they'd pay for the whole military attack.
They pay for everything right now.
Wow.
You know, the U.S. sending weapons there, it's, you know, it's just like bringing beer to Grand Rapids or something. We have so much beer, we have to get rid of it at cheap prices, you know?
Yeah.
But
So,
there's so many weapons already in
Right.
Syria that when the Syrian government takes areas away from the rebels, the first thing they do is collect the weapons and destroy them, because they're just there's so much gear
Oh, yeah.
on the ground. So, you know, what the US public understands about the war versus what the US role there is already.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like, oh, we're suddenly
I'm
gonna
not
see
sure
US
The
involvement.
US
Right.
is, people are supposed to understand.
Yeah, and
I think, you know, there's a
That's right.
conspiracy there to keep us ignorant, and I don't think you find that same thing being true throughout the world. You find Europe much better informed all along on what's going on in the world.
Yeah, there's a
and
lot
so
of
forth.
uninformed opposition, just fatigue, you know, oh, we gotta take care of our own problems, and that's about the end of the
But we have to have the
argument, but it's
local crime
true.
report before we get upset about chemical weapons, you know.
So what do people think is gonna happen next week? On Monday, Obama's gonna say, Congress, it's time to vote for this war. We want a yes out of you. There's already the wheeling and dealing you referenced to. I
Yeah.
saw an article about farm bills
Oh, yeah.
being funded as a trade-off to vote yes
Right.
on the war.
And we'll support you here, then you gotta cut more to lower the debt ceiling, or, you know, I mean, there's
What
all
is it
sorts
called?
of,
Pork barrel, is it?
well,
It's called lying, cheating, and
right.
stealing.
Right.
You know, what I wanna know is, do people think, I tend to think that they're gonna vote for the war,
Oh,
and it's gonna proceed.
I think just a precedent has been set that, for any number of reasons, most of the congressional reps, the Senate's already pretty much in the bag. I think it's the House of Representatives where the drama might get a little thick.
What are Michigan senators doing?
Levin's gung ho for war, and Stefanow's saying undecided, but probably she'll go along with it.
Some social workers for war, is that her slogan?
You know?
More jobs at home, more war
Yeah, right,
abroad?
we can go do post-traumatic stress treatment after the dust settles.
Ugh.
Sorry for the grim humor, folks, but that's, I guess something you gotta laugh.
We've been there.
Yeah. Our national security, our military posture has been kind of called into question. We gotta back it up
Yeah,
with
macho.
a strong arm attack. Otherwise, we lose credibility. They don't take us seriously. We embolden the enemy. So it's a complicated issue, and I think we're probably at that point of wrapping up this episode of IGE Talks. Haven't exactly accomplished a lot, but we've sort of laid out some possibilities, some visions for how we can connect with the younger generation, some cool activities coming up at the end of this month, but don't let it end on September 21st or 22nd, folks. This is a long, lifelong struggle, a lifelong process. I want to thank our sponsors, Caribou Coffee. Maybe you see me holding this mug, or some of our other people enjoying Caribou Coffee from southeast part of the state. And also Marge's Donut Den over there on Wyoming in 28th Street for providing some of the snacks here. Just another little added incentive. So if you enjoy the program and want to be part of the conversation that we have here, our sponsors gladly and generously provide some goodies that we all partake of and enjoy.
Caribou Coffee in Royal Oak, Michigan.
Royal Oak, Michigan, that's
Royal Oak,
right.
Michigan.
All right.
And if anyone wants to support IGE, we
Yes,
are
Institute for Global
open
Education.
to,
Grassroots, nonprofit, local,
Nonprofit,
homegrown, no sugar daddy, deep pockets
There we
funding
go.
for us.
There
This
we go.
is just
We're
strictly.
kind of poor.
We're kind of poor. We're scraping by, folks. We could use some donations. Membership basically gives you the perk of supporting a good group of people and being involved, letting your voice be heard in an organized way, putting on activities like the Week of Peace and other events that sponsored by the Institute for Global Education. So, again, my name's David Blakeslee. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions to an excellent conversation. Not just griping, but trying to get involved in doing something to make this world a better place. So until we meet again in October, peace.
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 Peace be with you.